All right, welcome everyone. Today is April 15th, which is typically tax day in the States, but I think we got an extra month. Welcome to our CSI Secrets call. Just FYI, for those who are new, this call is governed by the CNCF Code of Conduct. So I always say if you're nice and kind to each other, you'll be fine. We got a quick agenda here, but what we like to do, if you're new to the call, if you want to introduce yourself and maybe talk about what interests you in the project and maybe anything that you like to talk about or would like to work with. So we'll kick that off. Dan, Dane, you want to intro yourself to the community?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Dane. I don't have much history as a software developer. I only just got started last year, but was looking for some open source to work on and thought I could learn something if I joined a Kubernetes SIG. So here I am.
Nice. Glad to have you. I'm sure we can find some stuff for you to do.
Yeah, Dane just got his first PR merged yesterday in our CSI driver repo.
Oh, awesome. Great. All right, with that, let's go ahead and go down the agenda items. I will moderate. I think I can do double duty. The list is short here, so I'll put myself on the hook for notes. And with that, we will kick it off. Anish, I think you're up first. We're going to talk about making the filtered watch default after current +3 releases. Want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, so in the last release, we added a feature flag, right? Filtered watch secret. So that is mostly used only for node publish secret. So we've kept that as an optional field so that users who are using node publish secret now can take the necessary action. So they can label the secrets and then also enable it by default on their own. So if you scroll down a little bit, we have that a little bit down. Yeah, so inside the warning, right? So we tell them that after the last release, if they want to have the CSI driver using as less memory as possible, then we have enabled filtered watch everywhere we can. And the only last piece is for the node publish secret ref. And for that, it requires user action where they need to label their existing secrets to say this secret is being used by CSI driver. And then they can enable the filtered watch on those secrets as well using the feature flag. So the idea is in the docs, we added that we want to enable this by default after N+3 releases, so that it gives enough time for all existing users to start labeling their application. This secret is used heavily, at least in Azure provider, from what I've seen, because if they want to use service principal, they use it with that. And also for GCP, it is possible, but it is not documented yet. Rita had a question that if you make it on by default, would users hit some issue, right? Like if they haven't read the docs. So I just wanted to post it here and see what others think and what other ways we can try to amplify this before we make it default in the CSI driver.
All right, thanks, Anish. Any comments from the community on this?
Anish, do you know what's the status is for the upstream PR? I think the design document got merged for that one.
Right, they have a POC PR open right now, so it's being reviewed for the field and the label selector.
Do we have any plans to migrate to that at some point?
Yeah, so when we have a controller runtime release available, we'll switch to using that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for now, I'm thinking we could, we usually add warning and release notes, right? Like when we're deprecating something, we add warnings. So like every release note, we're going to say, please take this necessary action. This is going to be enabled by default. So coming soon, right? And then at 0.0.25, we probably make it default so that out of the box, we have the least memory consumption. I mean, I think there might be still some users who will hit the issue where they say the secret is not found because they haven't labeled it yet. But I think that is still better than having issues where users come up with high memory consumption, and then we tell them that go take all these actions and then go enable the feature and then take all the necessary precautions before you do anything.
One thing I was thinking is we could add a check in like the next release to at least do like an error warning log if we know that the secret doesn't have the label. That might just make it easier on the upgrade to like search through logs to find out, you know, more quickly, like action you need to take.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
I don't think on the GCP driver, I'm pretty sure that only the integration tests use this feature, and that we say that only the workload identity is supported. And does the Vault driver use the node publish, or is it all using the kubelet off?
So the
okay.
Vault. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
The Vault one doesn't use it, but we do have a feature request to support it. So yeah, we're hoping to do it at some point.
Yeah, and the thing is that this is only required if rotation is enabled, right? Because otherwise kubelet gives us a node publish secret, right? So we don't really actually get it. Only for rotation, because we have to reconstruct the whole request, we have to mock what the kubelet does. But I like the warning stuff, because I mean the rotation reconciler anyways gets the secret, so it can actually check if the label doesn't exist, and then it can generate warning for each node publish secret ref. And that way, when the user sees in the logs, they see this generated, so they know that they have to take the action.
Yeah, I don't think that will be a proactive, like, I don't think the users regularly just check the logs, but I think that'll at least help on the debugging if the problem does occur.
Yeah.
If the release notes are missed.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Can we add to the release notes also?
Yeah, I think we've been doing warnings on the release note for anything that's deprecated or going to be deprecated soon. So we can add that for all the next release notes, and then 0.0.25, we can say that this is a breaking change, this is changed. So before you upgrade, follow all these actions and then do it.
All right.
Can I ask a quick question about this? I didn't quite follow why the label's needed. So when you were saying it's only for secret refreshes, but does the CSI driver not store the metadata about what secrets are referred to by no publish secret ref? So it needs to kind of, you're saying it needs to reconstruct the original request.
No, so node publish secret ref is usually just used to provide the credentials for the mount, right? So when the user provides that as part of their volume spec, kubelet gets the secret and gives it to us as part of node publish. So that time we already have it, and then we pass it on to the providers, right? And then for rotation purposes, the rotation reconciler is responsible for doing a get on the secret and then reconstructing the mount request and sending it to the provider. And the thing with node publish secret ref is it's created by the user, and then they're just basically referencing the secret for credentials. We need to enable filtered watch as much as possible so that we don't cache all the secrets in memory. So if we do a filtered watch where the user says if they're using 10 node publish secret ref and they go ahead and label all of those, then when they enable the filtered watch, we'll only cache those 10 secrets in memory, and all new node publish secrets in memory. We won't cache the entire secrets in the cluster because we don't need that. By default, it just caches everything, right? Like when you try to get an object and if it's not found, so it goes and caches everything of that object in memory if you don't do a filtered watch.
Awesome, thanks.
All right. So what do we need next steps here, Anish? Do we need some more time to look this through?
No, I think we have an action plan, right? Like, so the first thing is we're going to add a warning in the logs. So in the rotation reconciler, every time we see the secret without a label, we'll add a warning message. So that's a start. We'll get that in for next release. And also we'll make sure that in all the subsequent releases until this is made default, we'll add it to the release notes as a warning for the necessary user actions.
All right, perfect. Okay, thanks, Anish, on that.
Yeah, I'll update the notes as well. I mean, I think it'll be easier.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that. All right, next up, we got Tommy. We got several items here. Removing files on auto rotation.
Yes, yeah. So as part of the move to the gRPC interface for writing files, rather than providers using the file system directly, I was looking at the auto rotation feature and how that works. And right now, if a secret provider class changes in some way that removes files from like the secret provider class, right now the driver and I think most providers do not delete the old files. Like if a file is no longer part of the secret provider class, it will just still remain in the mount rather than being deleted. This is a deviation from like Kubernetes secrets, where if you change the keys in a Kubernetes secret, like they will be removed in the mount. So I wanted to first check that we thought that the correct behavior is to match Kubernetes secrets behavior, and then discuss some difficulties in actually implementing that. I think it's probably true that we would want it to clean up files that shouldn't be there, but if there were any objections to that, I wanted to bring it to the call.
Sorry, I missed that part. Did you say if you update the Kubernetes secret data and if you have mounted the secret as volume, does Kubernetes go and clean up the data fields that don't exist?
Yes.
Okay.
No objections from me. I think that sounds like the right behavior to go and delete it. Presumably, the only way that secrets do get cleaned up right now is if the whole secret provider class gets deleted, or essentially the whole mount has to get deleted for secret to get cleaned up.
Yeah, and so then, given that there was in the original rotation proposal kind of this idea of an optimization, where if the provider knew that a secret hadn't changed somehow, it wouldn't refetch or rewrite the file. But looking into how that would be expressed of hey, the file should exist, but there's no change to it in the gRPC interface is a little bit weird. And so kind of some of the options are just on every mount for the provider to return the entire mount file system. And that would mean that providers wouldn't be able to do kind of that optimization. They would have to keep around the secret contents in order to respond with the secret contents. Doing that, though, would make it easier to reuse logic with Kubernetes secrets in this atomic writer package they have. But then looking at the providers, I don't believe any of them actually perform that and optimizations around that. So I wanted to bring it to the group of whether or not we wanted to leave in kind of a a hatch to do that optimization, or if it was fine to kind of require providers to return the entire file system on the mounts.
Yeah, at least in terms of the Azure provider, for that optimization, there is no way we can actually skip the call to the external secret store, even if we knew the version. So the only possibility is either we cache that in memory and say we compare with that, but there is no way for us to know if there is a newer version available until we make a call to Azure keyword. So I think the optimization, at least for Azure provider, would have only been around skipping writing the file if the version that we currently have and if the newer version that's available, both are exactly the same. So the only optimization was only around that edge, right? Like that's it. It wouldn't have been around the number of calls that we generate. Yeah, I mean, the interesting part around this, like, I mean, me and Tommy have been discussing a little bit on Slack, like this is similar to a put versus patch, right? Like, does the provider, do we always think what the provider gives us, is that the source of truth? And then just write everything from that? Or when the provider only sends a subset of files, do we consider it a patch and then just go patch the existing files but don't touch the old files?
Yeah, I guess kind of one of the things I was thinking is that it would be conceptually simpler to require kind of puts or to not allow patches or diffs, and that any optimizations could be more around the frequency of like reloading or refreshing data than trying to cache or do diffs on the data.
I have two questions here. The first question is I didn't get it, like when you mentioned the patch, how do you do the patch? Who gonna do the patch? And another one's like you're mentioning like reload the when we do the secrets rotation, you mentioned like a reload. How could we do a reload? Are we sending some signal to the container, or like, or you simply update the file? If you just make the file, the running process will not fetch the latest file, right?
Right. That was discussed a little bit in the rotation doc. I think it's linked down in some previous notes or maybe on one of the GitHub issues. But there's a reconciler controller that will periodically, I think the default is every 2 minutes, reissue the mount request to all volume, like for all volume on the same node. So right now it will just reconstruct the mount request to the provider that it sent on the initial load.
Yeah, in terms of usage, if you look at the docs, we split it in 3 different scenarios, right? Like one is pods relying on the files. They could have a file watcher, so they automatically get triggered when the mount content gets updated. And then the other scenario is for pods using sync as Kubernetes secret, and they're using it with certificates. Then when the Kubernetes secret gets rotated by the CSI driver, then ingress controllers are smart enough to pick up the change, so they automatically pick it up. And then the third scenario is if they're using the sync to actually use environment variables. So in that case, it would require a pod restart. So we have references to like third-party object, different projects, which would help them do the rolling restart when a Kubernetes secret get updated. But the CSI driver does not handle that, the third scenario part. It handles only rotating it, but recycling the pods is something we recommend users to handle it manually.
Thank you. So regarding the patch, I'm curious, like, what, like, is that increase the complexity of the provider, or who gonna handle the patch?
Yeah, I think that supporting a patch or some sort of like diff in the provider would complicate writing a provider and complicate the interface between the driver and the provider. And like it may allow for some optimization, but I'm trying to weigh whether or not that optimization is worth it or realistic or kind of premature.
I think personally I'd prefer the simpler approach. I guess one thing that I don't have totally clear in my head is all of the scenarios in which the driver is going to send mount requests to the provider. So we talked about deleting secrets or particular files from an SPC. Presumably that wouldn't trigger any mount requests to the provider because it doesn't need any information from the provider to delete the file. But then if someone edits, I guess basically there's deleting files and there's adding files to an SPC. And if we add files, then we're going to need a mount request to the provider. And if we have like a whole new volume request, we'll make mount requests to the provider. And if we need to refresh secrets, we'll make a mount request. Are those the main three scenarios in which we're going to be fetching from the provider?
Yes, except I think no matter what the change is to the secret provider class, it's going to be difficult for the driver to understand if it is an add or remove file, since the mapping of like secrets to files is kind of obscured from the driver.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's simplified to just the initial mount and then the periodic remount to check for changes.
And finally, any edits. Oh, sorry. Okay, you were saying for edits, and then finally, then I guess for refreshes as well.
Yeah.
Periodic refresh. Okay, cool. Yeah. I would support the idea of having providers return the whole file system every time, because there's a lot of complexity and kind of provider specific logic to be had in whether or not you want to refetch secrets each time. And so it makes most sense to defer that to each provider to me. I think makes kind of recovery and errors kind of much simpler and cleaner to recover from.
Okay, excellent.
It's good. So a lot of good discussion here. All right. So next steps, Tommy, on that, are we clear on what we're going to do?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I might fold this into, there's an issue open to reuse more of the Atomic Writer package. So I think kind of this discussion helps clear some of the questions that would block that.
Okay, great. All right. Looks like Anish snuck another one in here. Anish, you want to talk about the security audit?
Yeah, so for the security audit, they received another RFP this week. And then, so there are two right now that the third-party audit team is evaluating. But they're also planning to extend it until they can get 4 RFPs. So there is more room to compare across the different vendors and score that and decide which one they want to go with. But that's the update that I have for security audit.
All right. Thanks again, Anish, on that. So that takes us to the end of the agenda. We'll open it up if anyone has any comments or anything that they wish to discuss. We have some time to do so.
I'd be interested to hear the latest on migrating the integration test to Ginkgo. I haven't kept up with that, but if there are any updates, yeah, I'm kind of planning to spend a bit of time in those tests soon, but my plans may change based on that.
Yeah, so I synced up with Shen last evening. So we just wanted to see what is the best possible approach. Right? Today we have a PR that's actually pretty big, and it hasn't received a lot of changes or anything yet. So the plan that we decided was we want to do it. First thing is we want to do it in a couple of phases. So we want to add like an initial framework and then start moving each provider individually. So I think it's easier in terms of implementation. It also helps more contributors help out with the migration. And then also in terms of review, it makes it easier. So the idea is as a first PR, we want to add a framework and then also common utils that could be used by all the providers. So like creating a secret provider class, deleting a secret provider class, and also helper functions like Helm or kubectl and stuff like that. Right? And then the next thing is today. So I added a doc in the test repo, which shows what all tests are run as part of E2E, and which providers test those scenarios, right? So there is a little disconnect between what is tested with each provider. So one thing that came out of the discussion yesterday was how do we mandate or how do we serialize what kind of tests need to be run, right? So I think we need to make a slight change on how the tests are defined. So instead of having each individual provider define the set of tests that they can run, the driver needs to define what tests it wants to run. So basically what all tests it wants to test for the features or like the feature flags, and then like backward compatibility. So the driver defines the entire test suite. And then for running the test, it would just call some of the provider util functions to get like secret provider class for that provider. Because the only difference that we have today is around what is defined in the secret provider class, but the pod spec and everything else remains the same, right? So that's what we also talk about our project. We say the only difference is in the secret provider class. So the idea is we want to have the driver define the set of tests, and then the driver just based on which provider it's running the test for, it would call that provider util function to say, give me a secret provider class object for this test. And then the secret provider class will be used and then created, and then it will just run. So that allows the driver to define it. If providers haven't implemented that util yet, they can do a Ginkgo skip with it until it's implemented. But that way we have a set of tests defined by the driver, and then that's easier for us to monitor, and also just to ensure that we're testing only the driver capabilities rather than going anything specific into providers. So we had a discussion about it. We are going to try and write this up as a doc as well. And then I'm hoping to open a initial PR for at least adding the test framework that we can all review.
Thanks. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I really like how clearly that defines the contract between the driver and provider.
All right. Anything else from anyone that wants to discuss anything? If not, we'll go ahead and end the meeting. Thanks everyone for showing up. Our next meeting will be in a couple of weeks. That'll be April 29th. We will have this recording up in the next 48 hours. That's it for today. Thank you. See you in a couple of weeks.